So good morning, everyone. To people in India, good evening. Um, it is my pleasure to have Dr. Deepak SA with us. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to my students. It is an honor to have you here. So, to those who do not know Dr. Deepak, he is an assistant professor of criminology at DG Vaishnav College in Chennai. His doctoral thesis was on understanding. His doctoral thesis was 10 case studies of serial killings in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. These are southern states of India. And he interviewed several people. He conducted in depth interviews with serial killers in prisons. And he also wrote a book called The Unfathomable Lives. And it is very interesting topic, as you all know. So it is my privilege to have Dr. Deepak here talking with us. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak to us in short notice. Um, and I'm not going to take much time of yours, so I'm giving you all the time you have. Like you have 1 hour, and maybe like we can split it into 45 minutes of presentation, and then at the end we can reserve our questions for the end. So we'll have some time to have a more detailed discussion or question and answer section. Does that sound good?
Yes, it's case studies of serial killers, the methodology. Before I begin, let me tell you this topic. I will be covering not many things about serial killers, because in the previous webinars I were telling what I found in my study. So in the study, due to the special request from Dhanya, I will be concentrating on the methodology. That means like the methodology which I have adopted for conducting a study on serial killers. How I found what I found. That's what I will be addressing. This is the structure of the lecture. Dhanya, please feel free to interrupt me if there is any problem in between the lecture,
Sure, sure.
like
This is great.
screens
Yeah.
or audio.
As of now, it's perfect. We can see the slides and we can hear you clearly.
Okay. So this is the structure of the lecture which I will be presenting today. I have classified the lecture into 5 parts. It will be easy for you to understand if you keep this structure inside your mind. On the very first part, I will talk. I will give you an introduction. That means what I have done with my research altogether. And in the second part, why did I choose this topic for the study? Why did I choose a particular research area? And in the third part, the review of literature which I have done, that used to happen in the initial stages of the research. So in my limited time, I will try to give you an idea of how I collected literature and few insights which I gained throughout my study. And in the fourth part, I will be concentrating on research design, where I will talk about the entire research structure, and then sampling. How did I sample those individuals which I studied, and then data collection, the kind of methods which I followed for collecting data from about my subjects, and then finally the last part where I will talk about how did I analyze the data which I have managed to collect during my field visits. And thereafter I will tell you a little bit about my theory which was constructed. I will be concentrating more on how I have constructed the theory rather than on the theory itself. Uh, if time allows, we will go a little bit further. We will see how things go now. Okay, this is the introduction, the very first part. Here, I will tell you what I have done in the study. So I have conducted case studies of serial killers. To put a number on it, I studied 10 serial killers from Kerala and Tamil Nadu, two South Indian states in India. So from the case studies, I have created biographies. So all those informations which I collected in the case studies, I made it into a biography, and recently I have published those biographies into a book which is called the Unfathomable Lives Biographies of Indian Serial Killers. And later on, I have also made a theory, constructed a theory to explain motivation for serial killing from the study which I have conducted, which is called the life course theory of serial killing, a motivation model. So this is what I have done in my research. So for the last 10 years I were doing this research, and in the following presentation I will be explaining to you how I have done this. The first one is identification of topic. Since I was advised that mostly students, UG students, will be attending this program, so I made it in such a way that it would be helpful for the students to understand a topic or study a topic in future when they have an opportunity. So that is how I will be structuring my presentation as well. So identification of topic is the very first stage of the research process, where the very first thing is you should have the interest. Some people will choose a topic out of interest, but many people whom I know would have chosen a particular topic because of it is easy for them to do their PhDs or due to the pressure from outside. Some people asking them to do a topic, and because of that. So in my case, the very first reason is that I was so much interested, just like many other people who are serial killer crazy. I was also like that, and that is why I have chosen this topic. But from a research point of view, we cannot say this research is all about your personal interest. There should be other reasons for the research to take place. So that is what I will be addressing in the need of the research. So there comes the curiosity. Why there should be research conducted on serial killing is not because serial killers are everywhere, and if we do not conduct studies on them, they are going to execute everyone in the world. So that is not the situation. Serial killers are a rare category of offenders, and the chance of anyone to become a victim of a serial killer is pretty low. Still, there are a lot of curiosity among the public, and because of that curiosity, there are a lot of literature. Literature means different kinds of literature, movies, books, and even media reports. So much of literature created on serial killers. Around 80% of these literature are fiction kind of materials. As a result of that, people have a lot of perception. People's perception of serial killing is not based on facts, but based on these kind of massive literature which are fiction oriented. And if we do a research on serial killing, we can collect research grade material which can we can try to compensate that imbalance existing in the society and people's perception. And then there is another reason for conducting a research on serial killing, which is understanding human nature. Serial killers are rare, but they often express an emotion which is there in every one of us. Each one of us used to get angry from time to time. So if you want to understand human aggression, I would say serial killers are the number one candidates, because they have it a lot. So we want to understand something, and these people have it a lot, and because of that, by studying them, we can understand human aggression, and through understanding human aggression, we can understand ourselves. And the last one is, a lot of this imbalance of the literature will also affect criminal justice system when they deals with offenders, like violent offenders like serial killers. When there are not enough research grade materials, even criminal justice systems throughout the world will show uh, a tendency to decide on their perception of serial killers. Okay, all serial killers are like this. So we can make a positive impact on all of these areas if we conduct research on serial killing. So this is how I epistemologically, educationally justify the purpose of my research. So that take us to part 3, that is review of literature. So I did a lot of review of literature during the initial stages of the study, and that was very helpful for me because it brought me closer to the topic. So there is at one point of time you will stop watching fictional movies and books, novels related to serial killer, and you will mature into research grade materials, and that is where there your curiosity starts, and then that will help you to get some kind of factual knowledge on the topic, on the research topic which you are addressing. So gaining understanding of the topic, that is something which we can achieve with a lot of review of literature on serial killings. And then identifying other studies will help you to understand their methodologies, and their style of researching, which will help you to focus on your research. So if we do not know what is already done on a particular subject, we tend to repeat the same thing, or we will end up producing materials which are not as good as the existing materials. Then your research will be pointless. So in that way also, review of literature is very helpful in understanding what is the trend of research on serial killing. And then finally, the most important thing when you choose to do a research on a particular topic is identifying the research gap, which I did in my study, and only because of that I were able to come up with a theory which striving to offer something better than the existing theories, and that is possible only through a thorough understanding of the existing literature on that particular topic. And another thing which I have it as an insight on research on serial killing is that review of literature is not something which happens on the initial stages of your work. It is a continuing process. Throughout your research, you will be searching for review of literature, and now also, even after proposing the theory, I am keeping updated with the literature on serial killings, so that I can upgrade my theory and I can update my theory. So it happens even before you choose your topic. It happens when you design your research to understand how others have designed their research. It happens when you decide to do sampling, to understand how others have done their sampling. And even after data collection, it happens even when you decide to analyze your method, to understand how others have analyzed the methods. And even after that, review of literature will continue. So it is a continuing process. It is not happening at one point of research, like some research related books used to tell us. At least not in my case, it did not happen that way. So this is the fourth part of my presentation, which is the research design, where I will explain to you the nature of my research, which was qualitative. So there are qualitative and quantitative research. In quantitative, you will be searching for figures, the exact details of things to cover, and whereas in my research I focused on qualitative aspects. That means those characteristics which we cannot put a number on it, but we can only experience it through narratives and through feelings. And due to that such kind of nature, I would say, like, my entire study was qualitative in nature. And case study method is a very unique approach when it is coming to social science research, because in almost all the studies we will be concentrating on understanding what are the similarities between the samples, what is the pattern which is recurring in every sample, so what is the kind of characteristics which is recurring. But in case study method, we will be focusing on understanding what is so different about a particular case, how this particular case is different from all the other case. So in that way, case study is the striving to understand the complexity of a problem within its setup, not a comparison of other case. So by choosing case study method, I have decided to collect maximum information about each case. Any information regarding them is important for my research. I did not leave a single information away while I were in the field collecting data. Now, the overall nature of the study, there is a lot of problem when you go for a case study method. One is like, you are interviewing a person. How do you make sense out of that interview? Can you actually write everything word by word, and you can convert that into a case? That is very difficult, because we have to make sense out of the dialogues of people, because different people used to speak different. They speak different. They perceive the world around them different. So that is why the application of hermeneutic perspective. Hermeneutic perspective is the theory and methodology of interpretation, especially the interpretation of biblical text, wisdom literature, and philosophical text. Sometimes conversations will not have a meaning. All meanings are actually assumed. Meanings will come through the interpretations of the dialogues which we collect from our environment. When you collect information from a particular person and the context in which he is speaking, you have to imagine. So that is why in anthropological research there are etic focus and emic focus. So emic focus, in emic focus, you keep the dialogues as it is, you keep the narratives as it is, because a problem can only understood by the person who is experiencing it, not the observer. The observer cannot understand it, because the observer is out of the problem. No matter how much he strives to understand the problem as a researcher, the person cannot understand it. That is called emic focus. Emic focus, it is very difficult to do research with emic focus. So that is why in my research design, I decided to do it in etic focus. In etic focus, the person who is experiencing the problem is already inside the problem, and therefore that person cannot explain it because the person is experiencing it. Only a third person who is observing the problem and he observes that person within the context of the problem can only explain it. So that is etic focus. So nature of my study, where one thing is qualitative, then it was case study method, then there was a hermeneutic perspective, and the nature is visible in my analysis. Like the researcher is giving meaning to the context which he is studying. And then etic focus, that means trying to understand the problems with the perspective of the researcher rather than the person who is experiencing the problem. That means for each case I might have interviewed around 100 people. So I will interview the subject, the person who committed the murder in the prison, the person who is closely related to the convict, and also I will interview the person who investigated the case, a person who is a close friend, and if he had a person with whom he had a relationship in prison, like his jailmate or prison mate, I will interview him, and officers in the prison setup. If I could find, I will interview the teacher of that person, if that person remembers him in the school, and a lot of people I will be interviewing. So in a way, what I have done in my research is kind of time traveling. So not the science fiction goofy kind of kind of time traveling, but here I traveled back through the life of individuals, sometimes 30 years, 40 years in time, and I try to go to each and every situations which I knew they were, and I try to observe that situation. I try to reconstruct that at least through imaginations, and thereby getting an insight about the lives of these serial killers. So that is the kind of depth of the research which I have undertaken. Okay, here as part of the research design, I will talk a little bit about how I did my sampling. So locale of the study was Kerala and Tamil Nadu, two South Indian states of India. So some part of the Karnataka also I had to cover, because one case was extended. One person who was a convict in Kerala, he has committed some murders in Karnataka. So I had to cover certain southern districts of Karnataka as well. Then sampling method, I have chosen judgment sampling for conducting the research. Judgment sampling is a non-probability method of sampling in which the researcher selects unit to be sampled based on existing knowledge or professional judgment. Why judgment sampling is used for identifying the samples is because this is a study. This is a unique and special study which focus on understanding a rare population. So serial killers are a rare population. They are not everywhere. We cannot do some kind of random sampling. Many kind of random samplings which we use for identifying subjects for studies will not be applicable here. So I will explain you that with an example. For example, you want to study three women. You want to study one woman of 110-year-old. and you want to conduct an in-depth interview of that woman about their life experience. So there is only one case you want to study, and you have identified three such people in the whole world. There are only three women who is at 110-year old living in the world, and somehow you found it. And one person is in India, one person is in China, one person is in North Korea. So in that kind of situation, of course I am a researcher from India. I thought like, okay, let's go and study the person who is in India. So I met that person. Then I came to know that that person has Alzheimer's. Now your sample size has reduced to 2. There are only 2 people in the world. One person in North Korea, very difficult for me to get permission to go there and conduct the research, and the another person is in China. Somehow I managed to get permission from the government. I went there and I conducted the study. So this is an example of studying, sampling rare category of population. When you do sampling on rare category of population, most of the methods which you adopt for sampling in normal research will not be applicable, and that is why I have chosen judgment sampling. And many researchers who before me conducted studies on rare populations have chosen judgment sampling. And then the population of the study involved those inmates of central prison in Kerala and Tamil Nadu who were convicted or accused in 3 or more murder cases from 1986 to 2015. So a person should have 3 convicted case or accused case on that person, and he should have served in a central prison in Kerala or Tamil Nadu between 1986 to 2015. So I have met all of these inmates, all of these people inside the prison only. I haven't met anyone outside. So 2 of my samples were not alive, and I have included them in my study because of the prolific nature of their serial killings. Both of them had more than 10 murders on them. So in that kind of cases, interviewing the subject was impossible because they were not alive. So what I have done is I have conducted in-depth interviews of their closest living members and tried to collect maximum information about them for constructing their biographies. So in such kind of cases, in-depth interviews were conducted with their closest relatives. In-depth interviews means it may take like 3 hours, 4 hours. In prison, I used to conduct these meetings in 2 to 3 sessions. So every day, like morning to afternoon, like 3 hours to 4 hours, depending upon the availability of the prisoner. Sometimes they will go for cases to the court, and depending upon the convenience of the officials there, I used to travel to these prisons to interview the other 8 members, and the other 2 people whom I have studied, I conducted in-depth interviews of their family members, and also general interviews, normal interviews of many other people, and data were collected from field visits also. I will come to the data collection methods in this slide. You can see these are the methods through which I have collected the data. One is in-depth interviews with subjects, interviews with close relatives of the subjects, interviews with acquaintances of the subjects, interviews with police officers who investigated the cases, interviews with co-prisoners of the subject, officials of the prison where the subjects were confined, interviews with civil officials in the prison setup. So in Kerala there are these in Tamil Nadu prisons there are psychologists. They are considered as civil officials in prison, whereas in Kerala there are only visiting psychologists, and there are civil police officials who it's a kind of a non-uniformed cadre who would practically be a sociologist, sociologist from the sociologist background, and they will be taking care of the prisoner's relationship with the families outside. And in Kerala, such officials were part of the interview, and in Tamil Nadu, I have conducted interviews of the psychologists. Then interviews with the surviving victim. There are some victims who survived from these offenders, and I managed to get some interviews from the victims and their families also. Then interviews with the kin of the deceased victims, examination of the crime scenes. So some crime scenes were very fresh, because one case I have followed while it was happening, just after the arrest of an offender. Like within 10 days I were able to go to the crime scenes. So in that kind of cases, crime scene inspection was very useful for finding relevant information about the crimes which has committed. But in some cases the crime scenes were very old, like 20 years old cases, where crime scene is not there, it has changed, it is totally a different place. So there were these kind of factors also to consider. That is why I have a lot of methods, a lot of sources for collecting information. So construction of biographies will need a lot of reliable information. So when we have multiple sources from where you are collecting, you can always verify the information which you gathered from one source with another source, and thereby finally when I constructed the biographies, I were able to omit certain information which when it was not reliable. And there was certain situations in which there are two versions of the same stories which happened like 10 years 20 years before. And during that kind of situations, what I will do is, like, I used to give the two versions, stating that that version A and version B. So these are the methods of data collection I have followed in my study. So this figure explains the theory construction. So once I have collected all the information from all the relevant sources, biographies were constructed. How biographies were constructed is through putting together the information, the reliable information which are collected in a chronological order. So all the biographies starts from pre-life to present life, except in two cases where the offenders were already dead. And in other cases, how the cases will start is like pre-life means all those informations which are known to the researchers through the field study, which taken place before the birth of the subject. So this might have happened before their birth, but which are relevant and which are connected to the subject. For example, the marriage of a subject's father and mother, and if there is any issues, relevant issues in their family even before, any family history. Sometimes subject themselves were able to give such kind of information. In other cases, the interview with their closest relatives like mother, father, or wife, or children, they can give some information regarding that. So all of these information are put together to form biographies. Biographies will be categorized under sections like childhood incidences and teen life, and then career life, sex life, family life, and so many these kind of headings, all their narratives were given in biographies. So these biographies were also enriched with the secondary sources such as police and court documents. There are a lot of documents which will not be beneficial in understanding the subject's life as a whole, but it gives some important information regarding the cases which are against them. So secondary sources were also used for enriching the biographies, and then by scrupulously studying the biographies of these offenders, I were able to construct a motivation model with insight gained from review of literature of existing models which can explain motivation of serial killing. So this construction of motivation model, these constructed motivation model were applied back to the biographies, and with that it gave the descriptions of motivations for each person who has committed the serial killings. So descriptions of motivations are like one paragraph. It's a summary, like it will run into 2 pages with a summary, and that summary will explains what has happened in the life of these individuals, which evolved them into a serial killer. So this picture depicts the entire process of the research. And since we have 10 minutes left, I would like to show a little bit about the theory which I have constructed from the research. Okay, now I will share another PPT. So this is an operational definition of my subjects. After going to the Indian prisons, many of the definitions of serial killings I found it was not applicable. So I have to construct the definition of serial killers according to the Indian prisons. That is, a lone person who have committed 3 or more murders with a cooling off period between them, which lasts beyond a day, committed not as a part of an organized criminal unit or with any political motive. It's just like a person who have committed 3 or more murders with a cooling off period, with some times in between. A person cannot commit all murders together, and then he should have committed it alone and not with other people. This is an operational definition. I'm not claiming that this is serial killer. These are the people whom I have studied, and also I excluded people who have committed many murders but part of an organized criminal unit, because since I have searched for understanding the motivation of serial killers, organized people who are connected to organized criminal units will have so many other people behind them. So I have excluded them also from the study. So this is the motivation model which I have created, and as per my research, I explain the motivation of an offender, motivation of a subject who has committed serial killing like this. Motivation is defined as the nature of a person and the deep resting life factors, their complex interactions through various key incidents such as which predispose the person with a killer instinct, and the way the instinct was reinforced throughout the life, which eventually results in serial killing. So to understand this, it is very easy if you pay attention. Like, there are 2 things. One is nature, that is there for everyone. Even a child has her nature, a kind of tendency for a person to repeat the same kind of response throughout their life. That is called nature. And another one is deep resting life factor. When the nature is something which they are born with, or something which they have received it during the childhood, they have settled on it during the childhood, whereas deep resting life factors are those circumstances in the life of a person, like a person taking birth into a poor family. That cannot be his nature, whereas that should be the DRLF. So these two aspects, one is the nature and one is the deep resting life factors, they interact with each other through various incidences in the life, and which take them into a platform where they are really really dangerous. That means they are killer ready. They are ready to commit a murder at any point of time, but still they will not commit the murder. And this killer instinct will be reinforced throughout the life through a series of events or their circumstances in their life. So this is how I explain motivation. So one key differences which I want to establish here is that police officers who often investigate a case will say that motive of a person for committing murder is sex or money or something like that. So if they find a crime scene with a woman with torn clothes and marks all over her body, and she is murdered, most often police will state that the motive of the murder is sex. But here in my research, I would say that is the purpose of the crime, not actually the motivation of a person for committing serial killings. Motivation is something which is different, because a lot of people around there need sex. Almost all people need sex, and not all of them are committing murder. So we cannot say that sex is the motive for anyone to commit a murder, whereas sex is the purpose, whereas the motivation is something which is underlying. Motivation is what kind of a person he is, whether he is a person who is ready to murder a woman to get sexually excited. So that is what motivation, that is what I brought in my research. That is why I have explained motivation is the nature of a person, the deep resting life factors, their complex interactions through various key incidences which predisposes the person with a killer instinct, and the way the instinct is reinforced throughout the life, which eventually results in serial killing. Key incidents can be anything. It could be the marriage of a person, or it could be the death of a close relative, a close siblings. Key incident can be an abuse, a sexual abuse in childhood. It can be anything, but when it happens, two important components make up of the personality of an individual interact with each other, that will uplift them to a level where they are ready to commit murder. So that is called killer instinct. So once a person has killer instinct, he can commit murder anytime. For that, he need to find a trigger. So trigger is explained. You can concentrate on the fourth point here, because I'm going to wind up this presentation. So trigger is a shot happening in the life of a serial killer which activates the underlying killer instinct and pushes him towards the first murder. A person with a tendency to commit serial killing can sometimes abstain from it if he does not find the right trigger to push him over the edge. That means trigger can be something very very small if you look at that incident alone, but that can only make sense if you study the entire life of a person. So why something so small can result in a murder can only be explained by studying the entire life of a person. So this short happenings can elevate a person's mood from a normal individual into a serial killer. So once he make the first killing, he will keep on committing murder one after another. So that emotional platform is gifted to a person through the trigger. In some cases, A trigger is as simple as a phone call which that person received in a critical moment in their life that made the entire killing. Because of that incident, so many other murders has happened. So that is the importance of trigger in the motivation model which I have created. So I have used this motivation model through my research, and I have applied it back to all the cases which I have studied, and I am constantly striving to include biographies of serial killers from around the world and apply the same model to them to find positive results. Okay, that will be all. That's 46 minutes.
That's perfect, and it was very informational. So it is time for the Q&A section. So if anybody has any questions, it's the time to ask now. Um,
Yeah, I have a question,
yes,
Professor
Dennis.
or Doctor, somebody. Um, does India do profiling? Or everybody tries to profile serial killers, try to put them in a little box so they can somehow manage them better. Is there anything like profiling there? If so,
Okay.
what would be the general profile if you have one? The FBI here has one, so I was wondering.
Okay, I have been in the serial killer business for the last 10 years. So as per my
Okay.
understanding, on this level, on this grade, this is the very first study to understand to address the problem of serial killing in India. So I have
Oh
done
yeah, I
that.
mean you don't have that much. Yeah, I know you don't have that much. We need a profile here because
Yes.
they're out of control here. But
Yes.
I'm sure India, you're just like Canada. You're not really there yet. You're
Yes.
getting there. We are the experts here.
We may get there
So
someday.
you probably don't need a profiling yet. Yet, just
Yeah.
yet. You can manage them so far.
Yes.
I maybe in India there are, and then it's just not coming out. You
Oh
don't
yeah,
know.
that's true because they lie dormant sometimes, as he said, the cooling off period. This guy, Dennis Rader, the Green River Killer, years he had a family. And when he had babies, daughters, he stopped. But once they
Okay.
were able to take care of themselves, he was back on again, killing again.
Yes.
Go figure.
Very interesting.
Um, yeah. Any other questions?
Um, Doctor? Yes. Hi. I was also wondering about when you did your interviews with all those people, did you ever come across any like biases that affected your work in general? Because I feel like things speaking to the victim's relatives or anyone that was related to the victim would have some sort of opinion that's like affecting them specifically because of who died in their family. Does that like affect your research?
Yeah, I kind of feel like almost all information which I collected were in some degree were biased. So since I have a lot of information, so biases will be coming from opposing directions. So both the biases will get used there. So that is how I managed to build up the entire case. So each and every person whom I have interviewed, they have some degree of biases. People can only explain things from their perspective, not from others' perspective. So that's why I said, like, in my research, it's my perspective. Because that's what we have at the end. Whatever we say we are researchers, we only have our perspective to understand the universe around us. Thank you.
Gotcha. Also, I was wondering, were you thinking of going like in different parts of the world to try to do the whole serial killer aspect, or were you trying to just stick to India itself?
I want to go to many parts. If see, as a researcher, my aspirations are unlimited. So only stop my current situations in the life, but I wish to conduct studies of serial killers all around the world, and I want to try on serial killers biographies of there are excellent biographies of serial killers produced from USA, and I want to bring in those biographies, and I want to check that with my theory. And if you ask me further, I want to make a comparison of serial killers from India and USA, and I want to see how they are different from each other. I have some ideas by studying just 10 serial killers and doing data collection and reference of media materials on 100 serial killers in India. So most of the serial killers in India, they use materials which are not made for compact for committing the murders. So whereas in USA we can see a lot of use of materials which are made for combat, like people shooting others during serial killing. So 100 case, I came across only one case where a firearm is used, and only few cases, like 7 to 8 cases, where a knife is used. Remaining all, they have used materials in kitchen, and around 10 serial killers they used just stone to commit the murders when people are sleeping. And so Indian serial killers are in a way very different. Like when I compare it to the series of studies conducted in USA, so it's a dream. That's what you asked my question. That question.
I'll help you, Professor.
Yes.
I'll help you with the US ones. I've been quietly studying them on my own, getting all the perspective from the different sources.
Yes.
You know, and when you read, I have a whole collection of books here, which is books. So you have to, like you said, look at the information and garner what, you know, the empirical information as best you can. Yeah. They're terrible here, trust me. India, don't start yet. They're awful. John Wayne Gacy, BTK. Oh my gosh, I could go on. Ted Bundy. Oh, he was a classic. He looked good. He was a law student. He just reeled in those women and killed them. I mean,
that sounds like you're very impressed by Ted Bundy.
We are old.
Yeah, a morbid fascination. Yes, that's what we tend to call it, morbid fascination. Because you can't wrap your mind around somebody just looking at someone, how nice their head would look on a stick.
Yes.
You know, that's what he thought of when he saw a woman. How nice. 1 minute he wanted to date her, the next minute he's thinking of her head on a stick.
Yes.
I mean, this is just, you know, him. I mean, come on. It blows my mind, I swear.
Right. Fiona, did you have a question?
Yes, so Doctor, my question is, what's your opinion on death penalty when it comes to serial killers? Do you think they should receive the death penalty, or do you think they should just be studied?
Whatever I decide or whatever I think of, some of them are receiving it. But during my visits to all the central prisons in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, I had a unique perspective of this award of death penalty. There are people in Indian prisons commit suicide. Okay, these people are not on life sentence all the time. Sometimes people are in 10 years, 5 years. So during that time they are committing suicide. So there are some people who do not think of death as a punishment, and rather it's a way they can get away from this world or migrate into another life, or they have different kind of imaginations of the death. So speaking of death penalty as a punishment, I am very confused. Some people, it is a getaway. So it is a getaway from this world, and for them, if we are taking away the death penalty, it's a punishment for them. But some people who they really want to escape from prison, and so death penalty will not be same for every individual. Some people really want to have their death penalty, and they, if we don't give it, they will go for it. And there are that kind of people also in prison. So I am still getting around in making my perspectives on death penalty.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I I have a question. Maybe I'll shoot that now.
Okay.
When you did your interviews, I mean, this is a subject that's rarely, if not, it is unprecedented that somebody has researched on this topic in India. So when you went to interview people, you did interviews with serial killers, relatives of the victims, and police officers. Were there any challenges that you faced? That's like one part of my question. And what are some of the ethical concerns that you met when you had to interview different people, right? Like you had multiple sources. On one hand, they were serial killers. You cannot there are some ethical concerns about confidentiality, but these are famous people. So how did you go about your ethical concerns and your research?
Okay, to answer the second question first, because the first question may take long, and I'm seriously considering if I should step into that, because that will take some time. Challenges,
Okay,
there were a lot of challenges. Okay, so the
Mhm.
second question, ethical considerations. I have on the initial stage 48 serial killers. So all of them are perfectly fitting into the criteria which I have created. All of them have murders in their name, these many numbers of murders in their name, and from that, so many people were excluded because they are not ready to share the information. So a serial killer is good for a researcher only as good as he shares the informations with you. And there are also serial killers. Going to a prison and interviewing a serial killer, for me it's kind of nothing, because some serial killers will make us feel very welcome to all the secrets in their life. And during the field visits, you will understand everything is a damn lie. Understand all information which they shared with us, everything is misleading. So once I conduct an interview, I will go to places where this person has mentioned. So some serial killers, they want to gain the trust of the people visiting them, and they will showcase them in a place where the love and empathy will be showering from us. So they will make them in a point. And then also, like the police officers and the judges who are influenced by the variety of movies on serial killers are themselves influenced by these movies, and they put themselves as a character in those movies. I had been abused as a child, and I were abused by my parents, and that kind of stories they will also cook up and tell us. So movies work both ways. Serial killers are also becoming characters of the same movies, and they will give us stories. So as a researcher, when I did my research, everyone's question was like, didn't they attack you, dude? That kind of things. Of course, in the initial time, I were also afraid. Like one point, there was no one near me, and there was no light for a moment, and there are that kind of situations. But see, I have included only 10 subjects from that 48. Excluded all of those people because they were not ready to share the information with us, and they were not willing to participate. So the willingness is very important. Sometimes people willingly join the interview and feed us the wrong information. So there are that kind of situations. So all the people who participated in this study were given a fair idea of what the data will be used for. But of course, I have to agree that I lied few people in the locality, telling that I'm a police officer. I just want to know where the crime scene is. Tell me where it is. So that kind of things is needed to identify the scenes. But all those people who contributed for the research data, I have informed them this is the purpose I will be using the data for. And I will not be publishing their names. And even in the book which I have published, all the names other than the names of the subjects are changed. So none of the relatives, none of the people whom I mentioned, other than the offenders, have their original names. So these are the ethical considerations.
Yes. So these offenders were like the only ones who were ready to reveal their names in the research were used for your study.
Yes.
That's how you went.
Yeah. They're only worried that I shouldn't use it against them in a court.
Okay.
So I had to convince it. That convincing was there was a lot of efforts. I couldn't address all of these aspects in the time which is available for us.
Right.
Challenges. There was a lot of challenges, Dhanya. We can speak for many days about the challenges, but yes.
No, this is a very interesting and rare topic, and like you wouldn't probably have like a predecessor to ask for advice like in this matter. Like for other researchers, they might have like somebody who would have already done this research and faced such challenges,
so that you could. Which I faced because there was no peer researchers in India on serial killers, and in India, I can't take a microphone inside the prison for interviewing a serial killer.
So you couldn't record the.
I cannot record it. The law won't allow me. No, I was a humble researcher. I was not BBC or any large media. They used to shoot inside prison and all, but I did not have that kind of influences, and because of that I was using the pen and paper material. And then later I noticed that whenever they say something sensitive, if I write it down, they will stop saying it, because that is something important. So whenever there's something very important, I used to act as if it is not at all important and keep a boring face. Later on, immediately after coming out of the prison, I will take out my mobile and audio recorder, and I will record every conversation which I remember about that interview. So you will learn the tricks while on the research on very long time. So I were in the field for 2 years, entirely in the field for 2 years. So you will upgrade yourself definitely if that you are in that kind of situations.
Right. Fiona, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Doctor, I want to ask you, all this research interviewing serial killers, how has it affect your personal life? Has it affect you in any way?
That's a great question. Everybody would want to know how harm is done both ways, right? Sometimes in research, in ethical considerations, we should also reduce harm to the respondents and to ourselves.
Okay. And you people are recording this video, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So to answer it in the most diplomatic manner, I would say that I have a constant worry of hurting someone. Especially because I know how easy for any normal individual, not just me, you also, anyone whom I'm speaking, anyone can become a murderer at any moment in their life. Understand? Probably we are all having that killer instinct inside us. We will not know who has the killer instinct. If you have that killer instinct, you are just a future serial killer waiting for the right trigger. That trigger could be as simple as anything which is happening at any point of time in your life. So if you get that trigger, you will get elevated and you may commit a murder. So that awareness is constantly worrying me. And yes, and why did I study serial killers? Because I am infatuated to that topic. So there is something. So studying serial killer, through studying serial killers in one way, it gives more information about myself. So I am being more aware about myself. That is one purpose of my research. We can understand our own aggression. So such kind of worries are there, of course.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. Hi, good evening, sir.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask, as you mentioned that when you talk to the prisoners or serial killers, willingness is very important, right? So how do you identify that the information they are providing you is fake or real?
Yes.
Okay.
I have collected information from multiple sources, and later on, I have also input from secondary sources like court documents and prison documents. So regarding a particular information, when a subject interviews with me, I already mentioned that I used to travel through all the incidences, understand, through imagination or through if there is a real place mentioned, I used to go there and I used to verify. So interviewing is just like overall there will be 9 hours of interview or 10 hours of interview, like 3 days 3 session. So after that I will be going through the details of that interview for 1 month, 2 months or something. And while traveling I will identify other people which they already mentioned in the interview, like their families, their wife, their children, and sometimes their closest friends. And so variety of information from very different sources. So a different version of the same incidences. So while corroborating all these versions, we will get to know what's the reality. But in a way, it's my own reality. I already mentioned in the research, it's my own reality. The truth is, no one will know what is real. So if I ask you like what you have done yesterday, you will say that you did this thing and that thing and this thing, and that is not actually the reality. That is the memory of the reality. You remember that you have done these many things and you will be telling it. So look, I walked back in serial killer's life for 40 years, 30 years. Then think about what is reality. So reality is given by different people, and researcher is giving meaning to those reality. What could be real and what is not real. That is again, that is why hermeneutic perspective is used for interpretation of the data.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
We can take one more question if you have 1 or 2 more questions.
Oh, doctor, I was just checking. There was a serial killer in India who was preying on children that used to do his laundry. There were little girls who would go pick up his laundry, and they were just disappearing. I'm not sure what province or part, but that was one serial killer I remember. Something Gali Gill. So he was just preying on children, particularly. I just wondered if you had come across him, just by chance.
There is one serial killer who is Charles Oberaj. He was not a pedophile actually. All of his victims.
No. Yeah, he was killing children. Yeah, the one. I was not pedophile. No.
There are many serial killers who were killing children, but
okay.
But their lingerie details and such things are not available in the mass literature in India. But I assure you that there are a lot of such kind of serial killers are there, but not known to the people. And there are a lot of, trust me, there are a lot of lingeries going missing also.
They caught him anyway. They caught him, so.
Yes.
So to follow up on what you on your theoretical model, did you find diversity in motivations among your respondents? Was the motivations of each serial killings different from, or even purposes different, diverse from each other?
Yeah. So most often the people, maybe the influence of a lot of movies and a lot of fiction materials, even some researchers point out that almost all serial killers were abused in childhood. So in some of the serial killers whom I have studied, they had very good childhood. They had no problems in their childhood. And then again, people when they try to explain something very negative for the society, they have a tendency to incorporate all those things which they don't like. For example, drugs can result in crime, alcohol can result in crime, and child abuse can result in crime, because these are the things which I hate, and this must definitely make serial killers. So that kind of attitude is there. But during my research, I have found that many things which we consider positive in society, like a person's love to his wife and children, that can also result in serial killing. A person's very creative and intelligent nature, that can also result in serial killing. Not often serial killers are abused in childhood, and they don't often abuse drugs or alcohol. Of course, in some cases it's a complicated interaction, and one thing I found out is no two serial killers are definitely identical. they're all different, they all have different motivations. So that was one among the research gap which I identified, because earlier many researchers have created models with a particular case or few cases. So they stated that almost all serial killers will have these and these in their life, and this is how their life will progress. So I managed to create a motivation model in which different kind of serial killers can perfect. So a person's nature can be different. For each person they will have a variety of natures which will be unique to that individuals. No two person whom I have studied have the common nature, common deep rusting life factors, common incidences. Of course, there are repetitions of certain incidences in the lives of different serial killers, but it won't happen in the same order, or it won't happen in the same exact state. So each and every serial killer is unique, and we cannot actually say what caused exactly serial killing. If someone says that this is what caused serial killing, I would say that's wrong, because for different people different things work out. For even for serial killers it's the same thing. So it's a very complicated, rare recipe which make a serial killer, and there are different recipes, not the same recipes.
Great. All right. If you don't have any more questions, I would like to wrap up thanking you for an amazing lecture. It has been very informational. You did explain to us the end-to-end process of your research method, which is great. It is like capsuling the whole course into one class. So it has been very informational, and thank you so much for speaking to us. I would, if you are okay with it, I would like to give your email address to my students if they have any further questions to contact you later.
Yes, I know I will.
Please.
Don't forget me, doctor, when you're ready to do your big break. Yeah, remember me.
Sure. I'll be contacting you. I'll be ringing you.
All right. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for your friends and students from India for joining in. You all have a great day. Those who are in the US, and a good night to those in India. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dhanya, for the wonderful opportunity.
Yeah,
I heard you are doing great as a faculty from some reliable sources. I often used to connect. Keep it up.
I'll talk to you out of Zoom.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care, everyone.